Staying with the same subject, but the results now of being led astray by misinformation. Keir Starmer is already facing calls to hold an official review into the causes of the riots seen across the country last week, which have so far led to more than 700 arrests. At least 30 sentences have been handed down, while almost 120 suspects are being held in custody. The Prime Minister promised swift justice to be delivered to those committing violent disorder during the riots, but this response may harm the criminal justice system for years to come, according to the Justice Secretary. With prisons already in such a bad state that Labour released prisoners early, within weeks of taking power, and backlogs in the courts, is swift justice for the rioters actually justified? Joining us now to discuss this, Liam Kotrie. Liam is director of Mary Monson Solicitors, and he specialises in serious crime cases.
Good evening, Nick.
Good evening, Liam. So, is there a crisis in our criminal justice system? Hasn't the speed with which the riot has been dealt with shown that actually it's working quite well?
Well, I think that's a credit to us within the criminal justice system, but we have been under great strain for well over a decade. This isn't just about prison numbers. This is about court numbers. It's about judge numbers, the number of barristers available, the backlogs of, 68,000 cases now, so says the Law Society. We are under great pressure to be able to do our jobs on a daily basis. We hear in the news all the time about victims of rape who have to wait years for justice, and those defendants who are being accused of serious crimes, waiting years to have their cases heard in court, finding out on the day that a trial is supposed to go ahead that the trial will then be postponed for another year. I have cases that are being listed in 2026, and that's going to continue for years to come. Serious investment needs to be made in the criminal justice system, top to bottom. I'm talking about police, courts, police stations, education. This situation is way out of control and needs generations of investment. And I'm afraid that's as bad as it is. One administration, one government for the next 5 years will not be able to fix this, but they certainly need to set us on a path. The things that Shabana Mahmood has said, or the New Labour government have said, are generally in the right direction. But her choice of words, that the fast-tracking of the rioters and the trouble that they've caused, the extra stress on the criminal justice system over the last few days and weeks, may hinder, I can't remember her exact words, but may hinder the progress that they want to make within it. Well, that concerns me. I hope that's, if I was a cynic, I'd suggest that may be an excuse for the work that they're not going to do to improve the system. But perhaps they would be able to tell us what they would have done, and now what they'll only be able to do as a result. But serious investment needs to be made in our system.
Do you think that the sort of special circumstance around these riots and the government's desire to get on top of this really quickly actually justifies essentially fast-tracking these people through the system? Because as you've mentioned, some victims of rape are waiting years, and yet somebody who stole a bath bomb from Lush is getting pushed through the court straight away.
Well, Nick, you and I both know that it's more than just theft of bath bombs. This is about the fabric of society. Keir Starmer is quite right in the words that he's used to say that justice has to be swift for these people, because we come to another weekend, and the concern is that another weekend further riots are going to happen, further property is going to be destroyed, further people will be put in danger. People are being hotels were being set on fire with people inside, families inside. This was horrible things for everyone to see. And so that justice had to be swift. I was amazed that we were able to fast track things through the court. But again, credit to the system of what is left of it. But yes, I agree. It was the right thing to do. Of course, it may cause delays otherwise. But I think delays of a week or two in those systems, in those situations, is the right price to pay. Sadly, for what these terrible people have done in these riots.
Right, so you would credit then Keir Starmer for his action, this sort of rapid dissipation of the riots under his watch. You would give him credit for that?
I would. I think any Prime Minister would do the same, however.
Well, I'm not so sure.
One would hope, because things couldn't have gone on like they were. Examples had to be set immediately, and hopefully that scared would-be rioters into not committing similar crimes. The fact that they've publicised the remarks by the judges, in fact, live recordings of, not recordings, but live streams of the sentencing remarks was so important to show that these prison sentences were unavoidable. Quoting the judges, unavoidable, because people just can't be acting like this, and I think it was very important that that point was made very early, which is why these cases had to be fast-tracked to stop these riots dead in their tracks.
As you mentioned it, I wasn't going to ask you about this, but I saw one of those judges' summations, and it went on for 15 minutes. You know, if the court backlog is so long, couldn't they hurry it up a bit? I mean, it seemed as though he was enjoying the limelight.
Well, you never know with these judges. I spend a lot of time in court, and a lot of them like to hear the sound of their own voices, and many of us do outside of the criminal justice system. Sometimes I wonder how much is about them and how much is about the actual justice that should be taking place that day. But sniggering aside, and I mean mine, these judges have a very difficult job to do. But not only are they are they sentencing people, which is, you say the limelight, what one might say scrutiny is on them. And they want to make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed when they're passing that sentence. And the last thing they would want is to be criticised or even have an appeal take place, and no doubt a fast-track appeal in these circumstances when they are the buck stops with them at the end of these cases to make sure that justice is swift and sentence is proper, but it can't be rushed. You know, less haste, more speed, as they say.
And on that subject about justice, is prison really the best place for someone gullible or stupid enough to throw a brick at a police line or upgrade their phone for free?
Well, I think the prison system isn't cut out to do its job properly. Overcrowding, lack of education inside, lack of rehabilitation inside, despite the best efforts of the probation service. Prison isn't always the answer. But in these situations, what other option do we have? An example had to be set early. When I started hearing about these immediate custodial sentences, I think it was a 63-year-old man, the eldest of the group, who and one might think, well, can that prison sentence be suspended? No previous convictions. All of a sudden, he's got his first sentence. Well, the answer is no. An example has to be set immediately. Everyone needs to know that if you become involved in this, if you break the law within that rioting situation. Some people call them protests. They are riots. These are riots, and unsanctioned riots, unsanctioned protests are riots.
You mentioned rehabilitation. Sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned rehabilitation. No, a lot of the people that have been arrested and sent down, this is not their first time around. They've got a record as long as your arm. So by that reckoning, prison doesn't work either for them or for society, does it?
No, and I've been on LBC a few times talking about these situations. I talk about investment, but the investment doesn't start in the criminal justice system. It doesn't start with police. It's definitely not about giving people longer sentences, as the Tory government used to talk about. What needs to happen is investment in society, investment in schools, investment in mental health. We live in a country where schools are asking parents to make donations so they can buy books. We live in a situation where ex-servicemen and ex-service people suffering from mental health are finding themselves in prison, having committed crimes, rather than being looked after properly in the mental health system. It's real investment needs to take place. Youth clubs, Sure Start, all of these things. These are the ways to avoid these situations. But this isn't attractive. This isn't a 3 or 4 year turnaround to win another election. This is investment in the people who need it most, and often don't vote. It's
well, they're complicated solutions to complicated problems, and that's not what people really want to hear. They want to hear a simple solution to the problem.
Exactly.
Which lately...
Tougher sentences.
Yeah,
Tougher sentences.
Yeah, which lately has been...
just doesn't work. Just doesn't work.
The reason your life isn't going very well is because of those people.
Well, that too.
It sort of works quite well whenever anybody has the gall to try it. The threat of white supremacists and far-right terrorism is more serious than Islamic terrorism. The UK has banned some white supremacist groups under the Terrorism Act. But do you think that successive governments have actually taken that threat seriously enough?
Well, not when they were voting for them, one might think. It took a lot for the last government to take action along those lines, at the risk of losing voters who may sympathise with those causes. So it was very difficult for them. It would be less difficult for this particular government, although they are very cautious about any move that they make, and it seems post-election they still are. It is a problem in this country. It's one that needs to be monitored very carefully. Again, education is very important in these situations. We have to get these people when they're young, and explain to them that this is not the way forward, and there's no sense in following this path. But how that will be resolved in the short term, who knows? Banning things doesn't always work, and in a free society, one should be very careful about what one bans. Not only that, but banning something may even give attention to a cause that we wouldn't want to give them. So we need to be very careful on these fronts.
And what do you make of releasing prisoners early? Hang on a minute. Sorry about that. Releasing prisoners early, because it seems to me to be sending two contradictory messages. You have done something that is so bad that we're going to lock you away. And on the other hand, we're going to let you out when you haven't even served half of the time that we sentence you to.
Yes, well, it's to add to that a little. It's not for sexual offences or serious violence, but still is happening, and was inevitable. In fact, Alex Chalk said himself post-election that the next Justice Minister will have to do just that. That even if they do. The 40% early release, 40% served of a sentence, then that will only last 18 months before the prison system is again at breaking point. It's, again, longer sentences and not addressing the original problem is not going to fix the situation. It only makes it worse.
What's the mood like in the criminal justice system? I mean, the police have been heavily criticised these past few years, but when trouble flares, we rely on them to stand in the way of danger. And lawyers have been decried as lefty and judges enemies of the people. It seems like the last regime wanted to really unpick the entire system from top to bottom.
And the number of police officers hasn't kept up with the population. They have the toughest job of all of us. You know, I'm a defence lawyer on a usual basis. I'm no fan of the police, but I do not envy their job. It's incredibly difficult. I only read about the terrible things that they have to see on a daily basis. Yes, problems there, investment in that system. But within criminal lawyers, it's there is disillusion. Do
you feel as though you're under attack from society?
I think we have pretty thick skin. The things that we deal with are more difficult than society even knows about. You know, the stories that we deal with, one can't imagine what the stories that we have to deal with. So I think we have thick enough skin to be able to deal with those situations. And you know, we're used to not having the most popular of jobs, but we are overworked. There are too many cases for us to deal with. There are not enough barristers, and there are not enough judges. Someone who is being defended in a case or even prosecuting a case the chances of them keeping the same barrister throughout the case, so that's the prosecutor or defence barrister, is low, because there's so many barristers and judges are throwing in trials left, right, and centre because they have to get through that backlog. It means that there isn't consistency in the representation. Now, barristers are very good at what they do. The standard of representation stays high, but it's still struggling. It's still at breaking point. And
So
will continue to. Sorry.
No, please finish that thought.
Well, it will continue to do so until there is further investment. I sound like a broken record.
Well, is that it then?
It's the main point.
Is it just about money? I mean, on a practical level, to address the issues in the criminal justice system, how can we fix prison overcrowding? Do we need to send fewer people to jail? I mean, we lock up more people per head than any country in Western Europe. Are we just more criminally inclined, or are we just hooked on punishment?
Well, I don't see this current government cutting prison sentences for anything. I mean, there are the ENCRO cases, which are the encrypted phone drug cases, which have happened over the last 5-10 years, and has resulted in a huge number of drug dealers going to prison. And those sentences are often in excess of 10 years, often up to 20 years. There are huge sentences for drugs in this country. Class A drugs, you do any kind of dealing, you go to prison. Now, maybe reform is required there. I don't know. Class A drugs aren't good for society. I can understand why there's great distaste for them. But one needs to be very careful about the way... I think this government will be very careful about any reform in sentencing, because they don't want to seem weak against crime, and they'll be heavily criticised by their opponents if they are.
But they will be weak against crime if they can't get 68,000 cases, the backlog, through the Crown courts. How are they going to do that?
I really don't know. It will take a generation to fix this system. That's the problem. It will take a generation. You know, I run a law firm, a criminal defence law firm, and employ people on a regular basis, fortunately. But the number of solicitors is declining. The number of criminal solicitors is declining. I hear in law schools that people are told not to do criminal law because there's no money in it, that it's hard work and intense work dealing with people going through the worst time in their lives often, and you're not well paid for it. Well, I mean, that simply just isn't true, really. But it's what people are told in law school. They're put off it. Of course, if you want to be a corporate lawyer, you're going to earn lots more money, but you won't have the stories to tell in the pub.
Everything that you just said about criminal lawyers, you could have said about nurses and junior doctors.
Certainly.
Yeah. Very good to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time, Liam. Liam Kotrie, Director of Mary Monson Solicitors and a specialist in serious crime cases.